There's something we rarely talk about when it comes to connection. We always focus on how to communicate better, how to be more present, how to give more of ourselves. And while that's important, there's an overlooked truth that holds just much power sometimes. It's the absence that says the most, especially for men, because there's a clarity that doesn't come in the noise, in the closeness, in the constant interaction. It comes in the quiet. It comes when you're gone. Men don't always process emotions the moment they feel them. Unlike what you might expect, many men need distance to even hear their own feelings. When you're constantly available, always texting back, always there to talk, always there to reassure, he doesn't have to feel anything deeply, because the comfort of you is already surrounding him. Once the apology has been, he doesn't have to ask himself what life would feel like without you, because you've never let him sit with that question long enough to feel it. And so he stays comfortable. Not necessarily fulfilled, not necessarily committed, just comfortable. But when you step back, even just a little, something starts to shift inside of him, has been. The silence becomes louder than any words you've said. And suddenly, the absence of your messages in his inbox feels heavier than all the conversations you used to have. He starts noticing things that didn't hit him before. The sound of your laugh in his head. The way you encouraged him when he doubted himself. The ease you brought to his chaos. These realizations don't happen while you're in the room smiling at him. They hit him after, when you're not there to fill the space anymore. And when those thoughts come, they don't whisper. They echo. This doesn't mean you're playing games. This is about withholding affection or pretending to be cold. It's about stepping back just enough for a man to actually feel the weight of your presence by experiencing the truth of your absence. It's about creating space for your worth to be felt, not just seen. You can't keep trying to prove how much you care, how loyal you are, how much value you bring. Because the more you overexpress it, the more he gets used to it, and the less he examines his own heart. And here's the part no one tells Yug: a man might like having you around, but that doesn't mean he realizes how much he needs you. Wanting someone and valuing someone are two very different things. It's absence that bridges that gap. It's the missing of you that causes him to confront what life looks like without you in it. And that's when he begins to value, not just for what you do or how you make him feel in the moment, but for who you are and the meaning you hold in his life. Because, let's be honest, Dang, sometimes the constant availability makes it too easy. He never has to earn your time. He never has to wonder what you're thinking or whether he's showing up enough for you. He never even has to consider that your presence in his life is something that could disappear. And so, without realizing it, he stops putting in effort. Not because he doesn't care, but because he hasn't had to truly reflect on what you mean to him. He hasn't had a reason to go deep. You've been emotionally feeding him without letting him feel hunger. You've been emotionally holding him without ever letting go. And that, ironically, creates emotional laziness. But when you remove yourself, not with anger, not with drama, just with quiet grace, you give him the gift of perspective. Suddenly, all the things he's gotten used to aren't there anymore. The good morning texts, the thinking of you messages, the small, thoughtful gestures, gone. And that's when the panic starts to rise. Not necessarily out of fear of losing you, but because he starts feeling you, not just in his head, but in his body. He starts sensing what life is like when you're not holding space for him anymore. And that's a powerful, powerful moment, Because that's when he realizes that what you brought wasn't just convenience, it was connection. And look, some men won't get it. Some will let the silence go on forever, hoping you'll break it first. Some won't chase, some won't reflect. And that's okay, because even in that outcome, you get your clarity. You get to see whether this is a man who's just enjoying your presence, or a man who's truly awakened by your absence. Either way, you stop wasting your time in a space where your value isn't being realized. You're not meant to keep proving yourself. You're not meant to hold up the whole relationship while waiting for someone to catch up emotionally. You're meant to live your life fully. And the right man, the one who truly sees you, he'll feel that gap when you're gone. And he'll come closer not just with words, but with clarity and commitment. He'll know, not because you told him, but because the silence showed him. Sometimes it's the space you create that finally makes a man realize. You're the one. There's a truth that stings a little at first, but sets you free once you accept it due. Men don't value what they think they'll always have. It's not because they're ungrateful. It's because comfort tricks the mind into believing that something precious will always be there. And until a man feels he might actually lose you, he doesn't truly measure your worth. Apology has been. We tend to give, and give in the hope that if we show someone how much they mean to us, they'll finally give back in equal measure. We over-deliver in love, overexpress our loyalty, stay when we're not being met, all because we believe that proving our value will earn us love. But the problem is, then, value isn't proven through effort alone. It's recognized when something is no longer within easy reach. That's when a man stops coasting. That's when he has to decide whether he's willing to risk losing what he didn't fully realize he was holding. You see, when you're always there, when your energy, your time, your presence are consistently available, he begins to believe, often unconsciously, that you'll always be there. And when someone believes they can't lose you, they stop treating you like someone they could lose. The urgency fades, the fire dulls, and the respect slowly erodes, not because he doesn't like you, because nothing's waking him up to how much there is to lose. But the moment you pull back, even just enough to shift the energy, everything changes. You no longer fill the space like before. You stop initiating, stop overextending, stop showing up for someone who hasn't shown up for you. And in that shift, you create the possibility of loss. That possibility is what forces him to feel what life looks like without you in it, and that's where real respect starts to grow. This isn't about making someone jealous or playing games. Has been. It's about understanding human behavior. We only fight for what we feel we might lose. We only put in effort when we feel that something is slipping through our fingers. And sometimes your presence alone doesn't inspire that effort. Your absence does. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone finally step up only after their partner stopped trying? How often do we hear stories of a man who didn't realize how deeply he loved someone until she stopped texting back, or until she no longer showed up to make the plans, fix the problems, carry the connection? It's not the presence that woke him up. It was the sudden absence, that unfamiliar space, that unexpected quiet, that undeniable discomfort. When he doesn't know whether he still has you, that's when the game changes. That's when he starts thinking, wait, was I too relaxed? Did I take her for granted? Did I stop doing the things I used to do? And in that reflection, a man either rises to meet your value or reveals that he was never capable of holding it in the first place. Both outcomes are clarity for you. here's the thing, he only gets there when you're brave enough to step away. And that's hard, I know, especially when you love someone, especially when you've poured so much of yourself into making something work. But the truth is, the more you give without receiving, the more invisible you become. The more you stay without boundaries, the less he has to reach for you. And reaching, that intentional pursuit, that's where love deepens. That's where commitment grows. You can't build a strong relationship with someone who never has to work to keep you. Relationships require effort on both sides. They require mutual recognition of value. And once the apology has been, that recognition doesn't happen if he's never faced with the possibility of not having you. You become more valuable in a man's eyes, not when you convince him of your worth, but when he realizes it on his own. And he can only do that when the constant flow of your attention, affection, and energy pauses long enough for him to notice what he's about to lose. That space invites him to reflect. That pause invites him to pursue. And in that pursuit, you finally get to see the truth of what you mean to him. Not based on his words, but based on his actions when the comfort disappears. The danger in always being available is that it sends the messaging, you don't need to try, I'm not going anywhere. And that message, as loving as it might feel in the moment, gives him permission to stop showing up. But when you become scarce, not distant in a cruel way, but intentional in your energy, you send a different message. I'm valuable, and I won't stay where I'm not met. That message commands respect. That message wakes people up. That message makes a man choose you rise up or risk losing you forever. And if he does rise up, you'll know it's not because you begged or chased or convinced. It's because he felt your value in your absence. He understood in the silence that what you brought into his life wasn't replaceable, that no one else makes him feel the way you did, that your presence wasn't a convenience. It was a gift, and he'll start showing up like someone who understands the cost of losing that gift. But if he doesn't rise it, if he lets you walk away, if he stays in his comfort, even when you've created the discomfort of distance has been, then that's your answer. That's your freedom. That's your sign that he was never willing to risk anything to keep you. And someone who won't risk anything doesn't deserve everything, because real love shows up when it's at risk. It commits when it's faced with loss. And the man who truly sees you, he'll never let you go once he realizes you might be gone. There's a quiet shift that happens in relationships, and most of the time, people don't even notice it until it's too late. In the beginning, everything is electric. Every conversation feels new. Every moment feels intentional, and there's a natural curiosity between two people. But then, somewhere along the way, when one person becomes too emotionally available too soon, the dynamic begins to change. It's not about love fading. It's about the mystery being smothered by overexposure. And for men especially, that mystery is often the very thing that kept the fire alive in the first place. When you're always available, always responding instantly, always offering reassurance before it's even asked for, you remove the space he needs to wonder. And without wonder, there's no intrigue. Without intrigue, there's no pursuit. And when there's no pursuit, the attraction starts to dull. Not because you're any less amazing, but because he's no longer engaged in the process of earning your attention. And that's key. Men need to feel like they're earning something. That's what makes it valuable to them. The moment it feels handed over without effort, something inside them switches off. You might think, but if I'm loving, responsive, and supportive, shouldn't that make him feel secure and closer to me. And yes, in a healthy relationship, those things matter. But the foundation of desire isn't built solely on comfort. It's built on contrast. The dance between closeness and space, between knowing and not fully knowing. And when you erase that space, when there's no tension, no curiosity, no wondering where you stand or what you're thinking, the apology has been you rob the relationship of the very thing that keeps it vibrant: emotional magnetism, neediness. Whether it shows up as constant texting, needing frequent validation, or always being the one to initiate, slowly eats away at that magnetism. It makes the relationship feel more like a duty than a discovery. It turns something spontaneous into something expected. And when everything is expected, there's no longer any emotional risk involved. That might feel safe, but it also makes it boring. And people don't chase boring. Absence, on the other hand, reintroduces the unknown. It brings back the element of, what's she thinking? Where is she emotionally right now? Does she still feel the same? And those questions stir something inside of him. They make him alert again. They force him to pay attention. And more importantly, they make him invested. Think about the early stages of attraction. There's always that little bit of mystery. That moment of hesitation before you text. That question of, did they enjoy our last conversation? Are they thinking about me too? That dance is part of what builds excitement. It's not manipulation. It's the natural rhythm of human desire. It's the emotional space that allows two people to lean in toward each other. But if you never pull back, if you're always leaning in, always pouring out your feelings without pause, you don't give the other person any space to miss you, to reach for you, or to feel a sense of longing. And longing is where depth begins. You're not meant to be a constant, always on emotional supplier. You're not meant to be someone's source of entertainment, validation, or comfort every second of the day. You're a person with your own life, your own thoughts, your own energy. And when you start reclaiming that space, not as a tactic, but as a truth, you automatically bring the mystery back into the equation. You allow yourself to breathe. And in doing so, you allow him to chase again. That space you create by not always being there is actually an act of emotional generosity, because it gives him the opportunity to show up, to reach out, to wonder, and most importantly, to act. Not because he's being nudged or pressured, but because he wants to. And when he acts on his own desire, when he chooses to come closer on his own terms, that's when you know it's real, has been. That's when you know he's not just reacting to your efforts. He's genuinely drawn to you. You don't need to explain yourself constantly. You don't need to be overly expressive just to be heard. Sometimes a saying less creates more impact. Sometimes pulling back speaks louder than any words you could say. Your silence, your absence, your pause, it all gives him a mirror. He starts reflecting on who you are, how you've been showing up, and whether he's truly been appreciating you the way he should. And if he doesn't respond to that space, if he disappears, withdraws, or moves on without even noticing your absence, then that tells you everything. Polly has been. That tells you wasn't really invested to begin with, that his connection to you was more about convenience than it was about genuine interest. And that realization might sting, but it will save you from wasting even more time trying to reignite something that never had real emotional fuel. Mystery doesn't mean being distant or cold. It means being whole. It means you're not always immediately available. Not because you're trying to punish anyone, but because you're living your life. You're pursuing your passions. You're choosing your moments to connect. Ben, rather than giving yourself away constantly in the hopes that it keeps someone close. The right man won't be scared off by that. In fact, he'll be drawn in. He'll be intrigued by the depth of your independence, the quiet strength of your boundaries, and the fact that you don't need to chase him to feel complete. He'll recognize that your absence isn't rejection, it's self-respect. And that kind of energy doesn't repel love, it magnetizes it. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to explain more, give more, or love louder. It's simply to pull back just enough for someone to feel what life is like without you constantly pouring into them. Because if they can't feel that loss, they were never truly present to your value in the first place. And if they can feel it, if that space you create pulls them toward you, not out of fear, but out of awareness, that's when you know the connection is real. There comes a point where stepping back is no longer just about creating space. It's about creating truth. When you take a step away from someone you care about, you're not just inviting them to miss you or reflect on what they had. You're giving them a chance to show you who they are when no one is doing the emotional lifting for them. That moment of absence, that moment when your energy is no longer propping up the connection, forces a man into one of two responses. He either grows into the version of himself that's capable of meeting you, or he uses that space to retreat, revealing that he was never really standing with you to begin with. That's why absence is such a revealing tool. It doesn't just create attraction. It exposes maturity. It shows whether he's emotionally equipped to handle love that requires depth, effort, and consistency. Because any man can enjoy you when you're showing up for him, when you're available, when you're giving. But the question is, can he show up when it's not easy? Can he take the lead when you stop pushing everything forward? Can he recognize your value without being reminded of it daily? That's where the real test lies. You see, people often say that relationships take work. And they do. But that doesn't mean one person should be doing all the work while the other just shows up to enjoy the benefits. That's not love. That's imbalance. And imbalance over time becomes resentment. You might not feel it at first because you're busy loving, fixing, making things better. But slowly, without realizing it, you're teaching him that you'll always be there to hold it all together. That you'll always be the one who cares more, who tries harder, who stays longer. But the moment you stop doing that, when you stop filling in the blanks, solving the problems, reaching out first, that's when everything becomes clear, has been. That's when you get to see what kind of man you're actually dealing with. Is he the kind who steps up, who notices your absence and respects the role you played in his life? Or does he shrink, disappear, pretend he doesn't notice because effort isn't something he was ever prepared to give? Some men are only comfortable receiving. They love what you do for them. They love how you make them feel. They love the emotional safety net you provide, but ask them to give, to step up, to meet you emotionally. That's where their limitations start to show. And that's not because you asked for too much. It's because they weren't ready to give what real love requires. That's why your absence matters. It acts like a spotlight. It doesn't just create distance. It reveals capability. A mature man uses that space to grow, to reflect, to rise. He doesn't see your silence as an attack. He sees it as an invitation to finally take responsibility. He feels the loss and moves toward it, not away from it. Because something in him knows that if he doesn't move now, he could lose something truly rare. And that awareness doesn't scare him, it activates him. But the wrong man The emotionally unavailable one will use your absence as an excuse to detach even further. He'll say, well, I guess she's done. Or he'll go quiet and convince himself that if you really cared, you'd come back on your own. Because taking initiative, facing vulnerability, owning his role, that's not something he's willing to do, has been. That kind of man needs you to carry the relationship. And when you stop carrying it, he lets it fall. This is the moment most people struggle with, because when someone doesn't come after us, we assume we weren't enough. But it's never about being enough. It's about alignment, emotional readiness, willingness to grow. You can be everything amazing and still not be chosen. Not because you're lacking, but because the other person lacks the capacity to meet you, and your absence doesn't create that truth. It just finally shows it. Sometimes you have to step back, not to test a man, but to free yourself from a connection you've been holding up alone. You've been making excuses for him, justifying his behavior, telling yourself that with enough love, he'll change. But love isn't enough when the other person isn't willing to meet you in the space where real connection lives. And when you finally stop trying, stop chasing, stop proving, that's when everything becomes painfully, beautifully clear. What's powerful is that the right man will meet you in that clarity. He won't let the space grow too wide. He'll feel your absence and use it as a wake-up call, not just to get you back, but to become better, to mature, to take accountability for what he didn't do before. And when that happens, you'll know that the effort you gave wasn't in vain. It inspired growth. It made a difference. But if he lets you gob, if he allows the silence to last, if he doesn't come forward, even when faced with the risk of losing you completely, then that space saved you. It saved you from more emotional labor. It saved you from further disappointment. It saved you from continuing to invest in someone who was never truly showing up. You're not here to teach someone how to love you. You're not here to raise a man into his emotional adulthood. You're here to partner with someone who is ready, and your absence is the doorway that either leads him into that readiness or exposes that he was never going to walk that path at all. Because the man who truly sees you, truly values you, and truly wants a future with you, he doesn't let distance linger. He doesn't sit back while you slip away. He doesn't wait to see if you'll come back on your own. He moves. He grows. He shows you through his actions that your absence was never going to be permanent, because he would never allow it to be.